Ever heard one of those stories that feels like a movie but hits you square in the chest like real life? Well, grab a seat because this one's gonna take you far, straight to the African Savanna, where the sun scorches everything and the wind whispers things no one can quite figure out. That's where a little 4-year-old autistic girl got left behind by her stepfather. Can you feel the weight of that? Her tiny feet sinking into the hot earth, her curls all tangled, her heart lost without a clue why. The silence there cut deep, the dry dust kicking up with every shaky step she tried to take. The poor thing curled up under a crooked tree, fragile, as a bird with no wings, no idea what was coming next. But the Savanna, wild and rough as it is, loves to throw curveballs. Who'd bet on a beat-up lion, barely holding together, crossing her path? This isn't just about surviving. It's about what happens when two broken souls find each other. The big cat sat near her, and out of nowhere something clicked. A quiet bond that took on hyenas, hunters, and even the sting of being tossed aside. His roar rang out like a cry for life, and her little eyes sparkled with a strength no one saw coming. So take a deep breath, because what this lion did for her is gonna shake you up. It's a tale of grit, unexpected kindness, and a promise of starting over that feels like it came straight from above. Let's head to that corner of the Savanna together and feel the ground rumble with this duo that proved love doesn't play by rules, just heart. Picture a sea of golden grass, the sun blazing like a bonfire up top, the air thick with that dry, toasted earth smell. That's where, in the African Savanna, a 4-year-old girl, autistic and so small, got ditched by her stepfather. The guy just turned his back, the janky roar of his Jeep fading into a dust cloud while she stood there barefoot, her little feet sinking into the hot sand. No explanation, not even a wave, just an emptiness heavier than anything. Can you picture a betrayal? That cold? The kid, with no idea why someone would do this, kept staring out at the horizon. Her big brown eyes, lost and searching, tried to find something familiar, but all she saw were acacias swaying in the wind. The dry leaves rustled restlessly, like nature was whispering a heads up. She shivered, her skinny little body huddled against a twisted tree, wanting to vanish from that huge world. Somebody'd come find her, right? Loneliness gnawed at her like a beast. She hugged her knees, her face smudged with quiet tears that mixed with the red dirt. The day's heat pressed down, and the annoying buzz of insects seemed to mock how weak she was. Everything around her felt like the world had forgotten her, but a stubborn spark inside still clung to hope. What was fate cooking up? The tree's shade was thin, barely a shield against that merciless sun. She pressed her hands to the rough bark, feeling it scrape her skin. The sharp smell of resin rose up, blending with the heat radiating from the ground. No breeze, just a stillness broken now and then by a bird's hoarse cry way off. Was the Savanna gonna swallow her whole or what? Even though she didn't talk much thanks to autism, she felt everything loud and clear. A rustle in the low brush made her heart jump. She held her breath, curls falling over her forehead, waiting for whatever it was. The sound was different, heavier, closer. Something was headed her way. But what? The day slipped away slow, the sky turning orange and purple as she tried to figure out where she'd ended up. That place, with all its raw beauty, was a test no one should face, especially not a kid that tiny. Her stepfather had thrown her into a brutal trial, but sometimes what looks like the end is just the start of something else. What had happened next? She grabbed a dry stick off the ground like it could be some kind of shield. It snapped loud when it broke, and she froze, eyes wide. A creepy feeling of being watched crept up her neck. The loneliness choked her, but now there was something else there. She wasn't alone anymore, was she? The girl had no clue that the Savanna, tough as it was, held gentle surprises too. Slow, dragging steps cut through the air, and she shrank back, her heart pounding like crazy. The tree felt too small to keep her safe from whatever was coming. What if it was something hungry? Then, out of the brittle bushes, a shape appeared, big, majestic, even though it was limping. A lion, all banged up with a tangled mane and fresh scars across his body. She caught her breath, fear mixing with a curiosity she couldn't shake. Why wasn't he coming at her? The big cat stopped a few steps away, his chest rising and falling slow, like every breath hurt. His golden eyes locked with hers, and for a second, time stood still. There was something in that look that said he wasn't trouble, not for her. What was gonna happen now? The sun was dipping low, casting a warm glow over the African savanna. When the banged-up lion edged closer, each step made the ground quiver a little, a muffled thud that seemed to echo in her chest. The 4-year-old girl, with her dark curls, stayed put, tucked against the tree, her big eyes tracking him. The wind carried his strong scent, wet earth with a wild edge from his open wounds. Who'd guess a king like that would cross her path? Her heart sped up, but it wasn't all fear. There was a tired calm in his golden eyes that made her pause. He flopped down a few feet away, his body streaked with dried red cuts. A rough sigh slipped out of him, and she tilted her head, puzzled. Was he as lost as she was? The quiet between them hung heavy, but it wasn't empty. Dry leaves scratched together in the breeze, mixing with the croaky call of a nightbird waking up. She reached out a tiny hand, unsure, like she wanted to touch the space between them. The lion lifted his head, his messy mane swaying, and stared back. You could almost feel a thread tying them together, like a gift from above. The little girl, with her quiet way of seeing things, started to get that he wasn't gonna hurt her. The day's heat lingered, but having him there felt like a weird kind of shelter. She rubbed her nose with the back of her hand and took a small step forward. The big cat didn't budge, just watched, his ears twitching at a bug buzzing by. What if he'd shown up for a reason? That's how it started, no words needed, just a kind of understanding. She sat on the dirt, her fingers tracing wobbly lines in the sand, while he rested his chin on his paws. His slow, deep breathing filled the air, almost like a lullaby. She gave a shy little smile, like she'd stumbled on a friend where she least expected. The lion looked like he'd fought 1,000 fights, but right there next to her, he seemed at peace. The sky darkened, stars blinking on like shy lanterns, and the air cooled, bringing the faint smell of plants clinging to life. In the drought, she pulled her knees up, eyes glued to him. What did he feel about her, huh? Bit by bit, her fear melted into something sweeter, curiosity. She stretched her hand out again, steadier this time, pointing at his cuts like she was asking what happened. He huffed, a low rumble that shook the ground, but it wasn't mad, more like a groan. Can you believe a beast that strong could feel so human? That meeting was stirring something in her. A kid who knew all too well what it was to be left behind. The leaves in the wind murmured old secrets, and she leaned forward, like she wanted to catch every word. What else did this guardian have to show her? Night settled in for real, draping everything in a dark blanket studded with stars. The lion raised his head, his eyes glowing like embers, and she got a shiver. Not from the cold, but from something bigger. The tie between them was hushed but solid as the tree they leaned on. Was he really gonna stick with her? Then, out of nowhere, a sharp howl sliced the air, followed by rough laughs that made her arm hairs stand up. Hyenas. The big cat swung his head toward the noise, his body tensing despite the wounds. She looked at him, her chest tight, sensing trouble closing. And what were they gonna do now? The night in the African savanna was pitch black, only the stars and the hyenas' noise breaking through. The air carried a sour, almost rotten whiff from them, a warning things were about to get ugly. The 4-year-old girl pressed herself against the banged-up lion, shaking as the howls tore through the quiet. The big cat, even worn out, got up slow, his paws steady on the ground, his mane quivering in the wind. Could he take on all that? Her eyes shone, holding back tears that wouldn't fall. Twigs snapped under the hyena's feet, their growls bouncing off the shadows. The lion let out a low, firm roar that rumbled through her like distant thunder. It was courage pulled from somewhere deep, and a little warmth started blooming inside her. How'd he manage to be that brave? The hyenas stepped into view, their yellow eyes glinting like busted lights, teeth bared in mean grins. 3 of them, skinny and twitchy, circled the pair with clumsy steps. Their stink filled the air, mixing with the sweat dripping down her forehead. She clutched his mane, feeling the thick strands in her fingers. Could her guardian hold up? The lion limped forward, body stiff, old cuts cracking open with fresh red. He roared louder, the sound slicing the night and making the hyenas freeze for a second. She stood up, heart hammering, not sure what to do but wanting to stay by him. No one had bet on a tiny kid finding guts in a moment like that. The hyenas lunged, one going for his hurt side. With a quick twist, he swiped her with his claws, the sharp sound ringing out as she yelped and hit the dirt. The others backed off, snarling, and the girl grabbed a rock, its cold weight steady in her hand. She chucked it with all she had, off target, but the noise spooked one into jumping back. What if she could actually help? The big cat took on the other 2, body wobbling but eyes burning with fight. He grabbed one by the neck, shaking her like a rag, while the third hesitated, ears down. The smell of blood spread, blending with his hot breath. She watched, fists clenched, her throat tight. How could you not feel for a creature like that? The hyenas finally gave up, their howls turning to whines as they slunk off into the dark. The lion collapsed sideways, panting hard, chest heaving like a busted bellows. She ran to him, her little hands stroking his tangled mane, his warmth, thawing her cold fingers. She laughed through tears, relieved. They'd made it, hadn't they? That fight shifted something in her. Looking at him, his eyes meeting hers, her throat knotted up. Ever think about an animal flipping your world upside down? He'd stood up for her, all battered, and she, so frail, found a scrap of bravery in herself. What else was the night hiding? Savanna went still again, just his tired breathing and the leaves rustling in the breeze. She lay beside him, the hard ground under her back, but his heat wrapping her like a blanket. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. What did the new day bring for them? Dawn painted the African savanna sky pink and gold, the cool air carrying the damp smell of dewy grass. The 4-year-old girl blinked awake slow, still pressed against the banged-up lion, who slept heavy beside her. His low rumble mixed with the soft chirps of birds stirring. Had that rough night just been a dream? She rubbed her eyes, feeling the crust of dried dirt on her skin. The big cat cracked one golden eye, lazy-like, and huffed as if saying, "Get up, kid." She giggled, the sound floating light, and ran her fingers through his mane, full of twigs. Who'd believe a king that scruffy was looking out for her? He got up with effort, legs shaky but eyes set. He turned toward the horizon, where a stream glinted through the bushes. With a soft grunt, he started walking, glancing back to see if she'd follow. She paused, her bare feet on the wet earth, but something in him pulled her along. Where was he taking her? They went slow, his paws crunching the dry grass, her little feet splashing in thin mud. The stream's clean, mossy scent hit them first, pure life in the air. When they got there, he dipped his head to drink, droplets sliding down his mane, like jewels. She knelt beside him, cupping the cold water in her hands, tasting it on her tongue. Felt like a gift from him, didn't it? Then he did something that floored her. He limped to a low bush where dark, dried fruits hung like little stones, and knocked them down with his paw. They rolled to her feet, bouncing with a funny clatter. She grabbed one, the sweet tart burst hitting her mouth, and beamed at him. A lion playing waiter. Who's seen that? Little by little, she started mimicking him, watching how he sniffed the air, how his ears twitched at far-off sounds. The breeze through the tall leaves guided her to shade where the sun didn't bite. So hard. Trust was building, a bond that didn't need talk. Was she turning a bit wild too? The day rolled on easy, heat climbing as they rested under a wide tree. He laid his head close, his warm breath brushing her arm while she doodled in the dirt with a stick. His smell, dust and animal heat, was a strange comfort, like a home she'd never had. She sniffed, happy, her chest lighter. What if they were meant for each other? Come afternoon, she wanted to help him back. She grabbed big, leaves, soaked them in the stream and cleaned his cuts gentle-like. He growled but let her, eyes half closed like he was grateful. Water dripped from the leaves, blending with the hum of nearby bees, and she laughed when he shook his mane, splashing her. Who wouldn't love a friendship like that? Their pact turned into something unbreakable. He led her, and she, with her quiet ways, helped him heal. An odd pair, sure, but tough, taking on the Savanna side by side. The sun dipped low, the sky warming up, and she nestled against him, feeling his heartbeat. This peace would stick around, wouldn't it? Then, quick as a flash, harsh voices sliced the air, boots snapping twigs. Hunters. The big cat perked his ears, head up, and she got a chill in her gut. She looked at him, eyes begging to stay together. What now? Twilight dropped over the African savanna, the sky going purple as rough voices tore through the quiet. Sharp orders and cold laughs came with the thud of heavy boots. The 4-year-old girl felt a chill crawl up her spine, the smoky metallic smell of the hunters hitting her nose. She grabbed the banged-up lion's mane, her little fingers shaking. Trouble just wouldn't quit, huh? The big cat stiffened, ears swiveling to catch every sound. He growled low, a warning that buzzed in her chest. The hunters were close, their lanterns slashing the dark with yellow beams, the light bouncing off his golden eyes. She tugged him back into the bushes, heart in her throat. Could they slip away? Even scared, her clever little mind kicked in. The dry leaves cracked loud under the men's feet, but the wind in the treetops gave them a shot. She pointed at the ground, asking him to duck, and he did, squeezing his bulk between branches. The damp earth smelled strong under her, mixed with his heat. The air was thick with tension. The hunters passed near, their guns clinking. Cruel plans muttered between them. One stopped, his lantern sweeping their bush. She held her breath, fear bitter in her mouth while the lion stayed still, eyes nearly shut. It was like he got her plan, a silent shield. No one'd picture a team this tight. Out of nowhere, she tossed a handful of dirt sideways, the noise sending birds flapping off. The hunters spun around, cursing loud, and bolted that way. Kicking rocks, she let out a breath, giggling soft, relieved. It worked, didn't it? The lion huffed like he approved, nudging her arm with his snout. The sky darkened more, stars popping out like witnesses, and she glanced up, feeling like someone up there had her back. But the quiet didn't last long. A shout rang out far off, then an engine growled. The hunters were back with more, the stink of gas mixing into the night air. Panic hit again, but the lion stood, limping forward like he'd face them. She held him back, begging him to wait. What could they do against a crowd? Then, sudden as anything, a loud hum ripped the sky. A helicopter. Its blades whipped the air, messing her curls and tossing leaves everywhere, while bright lights swept the ground. Conservation folks in green uniforms showed up in the dark, yelling orders and pointing at the hunters who dropped their guns and ran. Had rescue really come? A guy stepped up, face sweaty but smiling kind, offering his hand. She hesitated, glancing at the lion, who rumbled low like saying, "Go, I'll be okay." The chopper's oily smell mixed with the relief washing over her. Can you believe a save that clutch? She climbed aboard, eyes wet as she watched the big cat get lifted on a makeshift stretcher. The savanna faded below, but that moment was hers. Forever. She pressed her hands to the glass, heart overflowing. What lay ahead for this pair fate threw together? The conservation team's chopper sliced through the African savanna sky, the roar of its blades drowning out the wind outside. The 4-year-old girl sat strapped in, her small frame sunk into the seat, hands gripping the belt. The smell of metal and fresh leather filled the air, but all she could think of was the banged-up lion, stretched out on a stretcher in the back, his golden eyes shut from exhaustion. Did he know how much he'd changed everything for her? She turned to the window. Morning light dancing on distant mountains. The team's soft voices murmured about fixing him up. She sniffed, rubbing her nose, and a new warmth sprouted in her chest. Not just fear anymore, but something growing steady. Who'd think a fragile kid like her could find strength in a wild beast? The rescue was a flat-out miracle, But what stuck was how it shifted her inside. She thought back to nights with him, the heat of his mane under her fingers, the way he looked at her like he saw it all. The engine's hum faded as she closed her eyes, hearing that roar that faced down hyenas again. Would she ever forget it? Shiu. Woman with tied-back hair and a gentle smile knelt beside her. He's gonna be fine, you know. We'll patch him up at a sanctuary. Her voice was warm, and a faint soap scent stirred a blurry memory of home. But her real home was different. Now. She nodded, fingers tracing the belt, still feeling him with her. What if this was the start of something big? At the sanctuary, the ground was soft, the air crisp with eucalyptus around. She hopped off the chopper, barefoot on the grass, and ran to where they took the lion. He opened his eyes, huffing soft, and she dropped to her knees beside him, laughing. Through tears. Ever felt a love that cuts through everything? Hope for a fresh start shone in her. The team promised a safe place for her, maybe a family who'd get autism and the sting of being left. But what she really wanted was to stay near him, the guardian who taught her to live. Birds sang far off, a victory tune. They'd see each other again, wouldn't they? The next days blurred with care. The big cat got a wide pen to rest in, and she'd show up whenever she could, hands full of dried fruits, their sweet tang mixed with the warm breeze, and she laughed at his clumsy eating. That bond was forever. The world could take notes from them, huh? One calm afternoon, sun sinking in warm hues, she sat by his pen watching him. He stared back, mane cleaner, body stronger. She whispered something no one caught, but he seemed to get it. A thank you. The gate creaked shut, but her heart felt, could life be this good? From abandonment to this wild love, she'd found a reason to keep going. Ever had an animal save you? She knew he'd been her everything, rescuer, pal, teacher. Strength pops up where you least expect, doesn't it? When the team took her off, promising a new home, she looked back one last time. The big cat roared, a deep sound rolling through the savannah like a goodbye, or a see you soon. She smiled, tears glinting, chest brimming with hope. The journey was done, but the restart was just kicking off. And so, under the endless African savanna sky, a little girl and her banged-up lion showed that sometimes the best stuff hides where no one looks. The rescue split them up, but their ties stayed etched in the dirt, the stars, and the hearts of whoever heard this tale. That last roar of his still echoes, a goodbye packed with thanks that hinted they'd meet again someday. The change in her was a quiet wonder. From cruel abandonment to a fresh shot at hope, she learned from a jungle king that strength grows inside, and a four-legged friend can teach more than words ever could. The sweet whiff of those dried fruits she brought him, the warmth of his mind under her fingers, it stuck with her, a slice of home she carried close. Here's the takeaway for anyone who caught this story. Animals have a special way of showing us who we are. They save us, heal us, make us laugh with their quirks, like that lion chowing down fruit like he's got no clue what he's doing. Ever had a critter turn your world around? They teach us real love doesn't need reasons, just an open heart. So, as the savannah fades from the screen, let this tale sink in. What about you? Ever met a horse, a dog, a lion that changed it all? Drop your story in the comments. I want to hear how those guardians found you when you needed them most.